sixth grade was the grade I remember. I was a first class integrated into an all-black junior high school in 1969.
Okay.
And that's profound in my life as I look back now because it was a 12 miles bus to a junior high, 12 miles. And it was 5 communities bused to one school, 3 black, 1 Arab community, and 1 white community. And I was the white community. And so it was in those years that I was beat up a lot, spit on, slapped, called names. I called them names. It was my dad taught me how to be prejudiced, and he taught me how to use the N word, every other word, and it was just survival of the fittest. When you go to school, you just survive. And so that's what happened. Really, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade was probably pivotal in my life, where I couldn't read. I didn't know how to read, so I just was surviving. I cheated my way through junior high school, went to high school, still a minority, cheated my way through all of high school, never missed a day in school because it was worse at home. So it was in those years, 10 years old, my dad was going to Vietnam. He went to Vietnam once. My mother came back. My dad came back. My mom had a baby. The baby died, a brother who died. And 3 weeks old, and she said he died because we had prayed for a girl and it was a boy. And so then the psychiatrist, my mother was not very well those years, and so the psychiatrist suggested he go back to Vietnam. And so that she would learn and leave us with my mom. It was in those years that my mom sexually abused us. And that I think that it was in France in those years that my mother was possessed by demons. And so my mother was a demoniac. And so my brother tells me of some things that I can't even remember. But I was in a room by myself. We had a little tiny house, 600 square feet, but I had a little room. And so when at night, that's when she would abuse us. All 3 of us were abused by my mother. And then at night, when they would shut my door, the demons would dance all over my walls, and I remember that. Oh, wow. And as an adult, I recognized it probably in my 30s when I recognized I wouldn't allow no door in my house to be shut with my little kids.
Yeah.
My son and everything.
No way. No door
shut. I didn't
shut.
know why.
Yeah.
But that's the reason why. Even to this day, my bedroom door has never, ever been shut.
Really?
It's like, might as well take it off the hinges.
Right.
But recognizing that once you got into your 30s, all the stuff that had happened as a young child. I graduated high school at 17. Graduated because I cheated my way through. And the week after I graduated, my dad said, it's time to leave. And so he kicked me out of the house at 17 years old, and I lived kind of on my own for a couple months in a car and, with some different friends and wherever I could land. And then at 18 years old, I turned 18 that fall. I decided to go to college where my brother was going, which was a Belmont Abbey College in Charlotte, North Carolina, which was a Catholic monastery college, which was weird.
Yeah, I bet.
I had gone to Baptist churches growing up, and growing up, when we had blacks come to our church, my dad said we're leaving because blacks and whites are not supposed to be together, and because the Bible says we're not equal. And so growing up, it was very prejudiced. Very divided. N-word used, party lines on the phone. You'd pick it up and scream bad words in there, and I'd raise cussing, and but I'd still go to church sometimes. I knew about Jesus.
Who would take you to church?
My dad would take us to church sometimes. My parents knew how to live double lives. Yeah. There's a life in the house, and then when the daylight comes, it was different. And so I went to college, to North Carolina, to college, and I thought I'd just test that out. And my grandmother lived in the hometown, and she was the only believer that I remember, and she would cook me a meal. I lived with a cousin. I did live on campus, and I lived with a cousin who was a hoarder. I never knew what a hoarder was until now, but it had a pathway to my bedroom and a pathway out, and that was it. It was never cleaned ever the time I was ever there. Garbage stacked all the way up in the roof. And I just lived in that bedroom and went to college and studied, and I couldn't read, so I didn't know how to study. So I failed everything in college.
Goodness.
Literally everything for two semesters, failed everything.
Holy cow.
The only saving grace was my grandmother would cook for me. She worked night shifts, so she cooked me one meal a day. That's the only meal I had every day, about 5 o'clock in the evening. And then that was just my life for the next year. And so after that semester, I failed everything. So I traveled back to South Carolina, my hometown. Didn't know where else to go.
Right.
I didn't have nothing else to do. And at that point, we had lived in a different house as a family. I wasn't really, I wasn't able to go back home.
Right.
I wasn't invited back home. But my dad owned a house. It was the same house I grew up in. And I tell that story all the time. And I grew up in this little tiny house, and he said, you can rent it from me. You can't have it for free. You can rent it. So I rented it from him. I had a bed in there and a refrigerator, and I started working the job, just working. I had 2 or 3 jobs, just work all the time for about a year or so. And it was at 19 years old that I was in that house one night, at 19 years old. I had been drinking that night, sitting on the side of my bed, and God just called out my name. And he said, my son, I want you. And I had been selling Amway with a couple that was really taking me to these speeches, and hearing these rah-rah things, and and he was treating me like a son almost, and he was telling me about Jesus, and it was at night, December 15th, 1977, that I accepted Christ one night in my bedroom in my house where I lived all by myself, and Christ met me at that point.
Wow.
And it was from that point, it was like the next day I went to church. I went to church to an Arab Baptist church in Sumter, South Carolina, where they made me the youth director within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, I didn't know nothing about the Bible already. And it was the same kids who brothers and sisters I had grown up with and partied with and everything like that. And God just began to take a hold of my life. And I couldn't read. So I really didn't know what to do. I worked at this church for about a year and a half. And I met this youth group in my hometown, met this youth pastor named Tim Callum. And when I was 20 years old, I met him. And he was working with the youth in Sumter, South Carolina, and that was his first youth group. And he was, I just began to go to his youth group and see some pretty cool things. And I decided to leave the church. I said, I really don't have nothing to offer these kids because I ain't got nothing. And I began to go to that church. And really, after about 2 or 3 years, Tim and watching him in ministry, I really felt God had called me into ministry. And I left Birmingham. His dad was, he was connected. A lot of students were connected to Southeastern Bible College in Birmingham. I decided I'd pack up the car and go to Birmingham. That's all I had, a little Volkswagen. And I just moved to Birmingham. And I bought me a van to move to Birmingham, big old rickety van, moved to Birmingham to go to Southeastern Bible College, where I really couldn't read. But they let me in, I tell the story. The man was a doctor. He invited me to lunch before I left because I had zero money, zero. And he said, I had lunch with him. At the end of lunch, he went into a closet. I followed him in. He brought out $64 worth of silver coins. And he said, here's a gift for you. He said, go and turn it in and see what you can get and put it on your Bible college.
Wow.
That was $640 at that point. I transitioned it in, and I believe that's what God told me to do. Go to college and just trust Him. So I showed up in December 1980. Showed up right at Christmas time, right after Christmas, showed up and started Bible college. I put that money down, and for 3.5 years I went to Bible college, never borrowed a dime. I believe God said go, and I just go and trust God. I had no clue how I was going to get paid, when it was going to be paid. I just thought that's the way God operates. That's His economy.
Yes.
If you want me there, trusting.
Yes.
Professors taught me things. They taught me how to read. They taught me how to love and fall in love with Jesus. But really, who taught me more than anything was something similar to your mom, a person. I met the piano teacher at the Bible college. Her name was Miss Helen Wright. Mm-hmm. She was a piano teacher there, and they said, you got to meet her. And I'd started in January, and Miss Helen, I met her, and she said, won't you come to church with me? I said, well, okay. And that was probably the first person I ever met. Most profound person on the college campus. Come to find out after all these years, professors, teachers, everybody used to come to her. She was just a piano teacher.
Yeah.
She had a little journal, and she'd write in her journal. But I went to church with her for almost 3 years.
No way.
Every Sunday to a juvenile detention center in Chaltville to Juvenile Detention Center. And she would speak to the kids. The boys would sit on one side, the girls would sit on the other, and I would go with her. A little rickety car, and she was 70-some years old, and she'd go the back roads all the way from Birmingham all the way out to Chaltville.
Wow.
Never getting on interstate, but she was probably 4'11", and she rode the little rickety. I rode in with her every Sunday.
Love it.
We spent every Sunday together for 3 years. And at the end of that, in the middle of she just taught me how to love Jesus. She'd just stand up in front of those kids and just open her journal and just read from her journal.
Yeah.
And just love on these kids. And then we'd have lunch with them that day, and I'd go into the boys, she'd go into the girls. And it was just the sweetest time. I never knew how much one person could influence, but I'd be with her every Sunday. And during the week, we'd talk about going. But students would line up to meet with her during the school year. Wow. But I was the only one of all those years that went with her to this juvenile detention center. Ended up becoming a chaplain out there for about a year or so until they changed it to all girls, and then everything changed. And after 37 years of her going, she went for 37 years.
Every week.
Every week.
Faithfully doing what God's called her to do.
What God called her to do. She turned it over to me.
Oh, wow. Wow. What an honor.
That's awesome.
Wow. And for a year until they changed it over, I was out there. I went out there just about every day and just served, wasn't paid a dime. Mm-hmm. I didn't know. You just give your life to the Lord. Just give it. I worked a couple jobs. I had to pay my way through school, plus God just provided. And so I went all those years, and I learned more than anything from this lady. Still the most profound person in my entire life. Wow. Her journals, the little journals that I have, is the same kind of journal she had. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, it's the most profound because I can testify today to her witness in my life. So, graduated college, learning everything, learning how to read, all that kind of. Professors loved on me. I had a time in my life, the safest place I'd ever been, ever.
Sweet. And from being so hurt and feeling so scared, like your life totally turned. I can't imagine the difference.
Transformation.
Yeah.
But having still all these voices in your head. So, the years, Southeastern was great years, met some great people. We had a great time. It was a small campus, small time, and I love those folks today and still got deep memories.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then it was graduation time, and I said, Lord, take me wherever in the United States you want me to go. I don't know, hardest place on the face of the United States, I'll go.
Wow.
I was recruited to go to Chicago, Illinois, to work for a group called Inner City Impact. A couple people from Southeastern were there, and I was going to be a supported missionary. I didn't know what that meant. I'd never been in that culture. Raise money, whatever, I don't care, whatever. So $700 a month. Supposed to raise, and I left. Before I left, I was a youth pastor for the last 6 months, a year or so. I was youth pastor at a church in Montevallo, a little old church there, and that's where I was working with a youth group and kind of figuring out how to be a youth pastor. Yeah. And at that point, I was getting ready to move to Chicago, and this woman was volunteering with the youth group, and I told one of the kids, I said, go over there and ask her to marry me. And she did, and She said yes. And everybody laughed, and we laughed. And a couple days later, I called her and told her I was serious. And we had never dated, and we were engaged.
What? Nuh-uh.
Yes.
You're serious.
Once you've been abused, sexual abuse.
Yeah.
You look at life totally different. So my life to that point was not lived very good, not very healthy in my thoughts and my actions, and it was a dark side.
Yeah.
The dark side. Well, I told my wife I said, we won't kiss before we get married. I'm not going to let it get that far because nothing had ever been good, So I moved to Chicago. She stayed in the Montevallo area, and a year later we got married. And when she kissed the bride, I kissed her for the first time, and now we've been married 38 years.
Wow!
To the glory of God. I mean, we had to get to know each other once we got married, so that was a little different. But I moved to Chicago,
and once you got engaged,
yeah. But in that process, I moved to Chicago. As a supported missionary, you had to live in the community we served. It was the worst neighborhood in the city of Chicago in those years.
Did it bring back a lot of bad memories?
Oh, it was. So I was there. Yeah, I mean, it was brutal. I mean, it was shootings and gang. You hear about what's happening today, but back then it was my neighborhood, and I lived 3 blocks from where I worked. I rented a house, and the first week I was there, I was robbed.
Oh, wow.
First week I was there, I was robbed. I was in my bedroom asleep and woke up with a man standing in my room having cut my windows and screens in my windows and crawling over my bed to get in my room, standing in my room. And before the end of the night, I saw gangbangers arrested, shooting, car stealing, and they just robbed me. And that was my first week.
Welcome to Chicago.
Yeah.
Welcome to Chicago. I lived in a Black and Hispanic neighborhood, and I lived in the same house for 6.5 years. My wife, we got married. She came up. I had a dog right after that. After I got broke in, the dog slept in the bed where the guy went over my bedroom.
Yeah.
Over my bed.
Smart.
And so I got a wife and got rid of the dog. And I lived and worked in Chicago for 6.5 years as a supported missionary. My wife came. We had 2 kids while we were living there. Lived in the hood. I could tell you a million miracles. I could tell you a million just times where if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be alive. Shootings and killings and gunfights that were happening all over the place, and so. But it was good. It was good. A good time. I invested in junior high kids. I was the junior high director. And within 1 square mile was 150,000 people of where we lived, and within 5 blocks was 10,000 young people. So it was some great years.
Big mission field.
Big mission field. A lot of work to be done just in your neighborhood. Didn't have to go nowhere.